Welcome to 2 cents Short of a Dollar, the show where we give our 2 cents and keep it 100. We're your host. That's Motiz. I'm Rue, back again with some live boxing news. Breaking Devin Haney, Vasily Lomachenko. We had the date. Now we have the venue, so it's really real. Just last week, we saw the press conference, so it's going down, and want to hear your thoughts. Hop in the comments right away, but right now we're going to discuss it. So Motiz, tell me, man, what do you think so far as the press conference goes?
I would say the press conference, lukewarm, right? But
Yeah,
not every press conference has to be, filled with excitement. It's just a good way. We just got the appetizers, and I think as time progresses, I think there'll be a bit more heated, right? I think Bill was probably the only one that gave a little bit of spice during the press conference, right? In terms of insinuating that Lomachenko was ducking and they had to chase them all over the world. That was a little funny moment there. But I would say both fighters were respectable to one another.
Loma's such a respectful guy, I want to see if Devin can pull something out of him, like the disrespect. But Loma's such a respectful guy, you know what I mean? But go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. Like sometimes with certain, I just think it's just the nature of some of these European fighters, right? In general, or fighters that are not from the West, especially if we're talking about the US versus the rest of the world, you tend to see some of these fighters that are a bit stoic in their responses. They're generally just trying to get down to business. They're not really trying to talk some shit. I think the closest you can probably get is some of the UK fighters, right? You got Billy Joe Saunders, you have,
chocolate brownies.
Eubank Jr., you have some of those fighters, right?
And Juice Head too, Conor Ben. Yeah, go ahead.
Exactly. Oh my God. Yeah, Eubank Jr. He's a funny one. I'm not gonna lie, but generally, for the most part, European fighters aren't necessarily especially with the language barrier. I think that plays a big role too. So,
right.
Yeah. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't too exciting. I'm just excited that the fight is here. Probably the most exciting part of the press conference was hearing that the fight was $59.99.
You serious?
These fights have been so expensive. When you guys were at my crib the other day, I don't even know how much that fight was. I'm gonna guess it was $75. I don't know. I just hit click purchase. You know what I'm saying? Just so we could just get the fight. But I thought $59.99 was a good price point, so I was excited for that. But other than that, I'll tell you my honest feeling. One thing I felt, and we're seeing it a lot in boxing, but with this guy, I don't think early on he was a culprit of it. But I think Bill Haney starting to get in front of the camera a little bit too much just for me. You know what I'm saying? He giving me, Tupac vibes when somebody needs to tell him, yo, if you don't want them all, your manager's all dancing in the video, come to Death Row Records. That's how I felt when I seen Bill. Because even at the face-off, he came right in the middle of the camera, and I'm like, bro, what are you looking for? Get out of here, bro. You know what I'm saying? They weren't doing the weigh-in where you got to check to make sure you're not getting robbed because, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, what are you doing? You know what I'm saying? So he's becoming a little much for me. I want to hear Devin speak more. But outside of that, it's pretty straightforward. Much of what I expected. I think Devin Haney tries to talk himself up to have a chip on his shoulder, which I respect. Whatever you got to do, you know what I'm saying. But he's had a pretty good career. He's still only 24. He's undisputed. People always regarded him for his skills. You know what I'm saying. He's been in gyms with some of the best and most notable names in boxing.
Yep.
But I feel like he talks that chip up on his shoulder. So even in the press conference, he just felt like, oh yeah, you guys are slighting me. When in actuality, I think he's been the favorite when it comes to this. You know what I'm saying? So just how do you feel about Devin's demeanor all around?
It's interesting that you point that out too, right? Because you see it happen every day just in life where when you feel like you're a victim or you've been slighted in a certain way for so long, sometimes when you're no longer the victim, you don't even realize it. You still carry that on you. And we see it all the time. There's studies done in it, on women, is studies done in it on certain minority groups, right? We see it happen all the time. It's just the victim mentality, it kind of holds you, or the underdog mentality kind of holds you. And sometimes people don't know how to break out of that, right? Because it's not like it's like an announcement or a sign comes from outer space and says you're no longer a victim, right? Now fairness has imposed itself. It's more so you kind of got to see it. You got to have some self-awareness and some awareness to the world as well, right? So I can definitely agree with that. I do feel like he feels like there's still a chip on the shoulder, or maybe I'm just reading it wrong, right? Maybe we're just reading it wrong. He feels like he's more deserving of what he's done, right? Being undisputed. He feels like what has been done is not enough,
Yeah.
right? And I think what he's also doing is comparing himself with the 4 belts that he's attained. He's comparing himself to like fighters like Gervonta Tank Davis. And he might be asking himself, I got all the 4 belts. Why are they still talking about this guy here?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I think sometimes that eats up, people's, subconscious, and it kind of comes out in different forms. So that's probably my viewpoint on the topic.
Yeah, I agree. I actually saw when they were interviewing Lomachenko kind of one off, there was just like a lengthy segment where they just went into Gervonta and Ryan Garcia, and they just kept asking about, but what do you think? What do you think about this? And he's like, right now I have my fight. I'm thinking about my fight. So I can definitely see Devin feeling that way. Like, I've obtained these 4 belts, but you guys are still talking about these 2 guys here. Ryan, who probably didn't want to fight me. Gervonta, who, I've been mildly calling out, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, why you keep talking about them? Why you're not talking about me? So I could see some of that as well. But I do think he needs to maybe just focus up. I mean, he always come prepared to his fight, so I won't even disrespect him. But like you have like a real opponent in front of you that you don't want to take lightly.
100%,
Yeah.
1,000%. I also like the way Loma handled himself during that one-on-one segment. I like the fact that he kind of addresses the reporters as they should be addressed, right? When they ask him a question, then he's not necessarily scared to say like, hey, I'm not worried about that right now. And when they kind of repeat it in a certain way or try to find a way to cater that question to the response that they would like, he still's like, bro, like, what you want me to tell you? I don't know how it would feel until I get the belt. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I have to see. I like the way Loma kind of handles himself.
Yeah.
During those interviews. So
another thing I liked what Loma said was when they asked him about Jermaine Ortiz, right? And then he said, like this guy's been my sparring partner because they asked him, was it Rust? He never said it was Rust. He said, this guy's been my sparring partner for a long time. You know what I'm saying? We're familiar with each other. And he also said, I bet he'll give anybody in this division a hard fight. And which was crazy too, because if people watch any of Jermaine Ortiz's fights, they're all kind of like ugly fights. You know what I'm saying? He makes all his fights kind of ugly. And then even before that fight, I remember specifically the commentator saying, if you guys are not familiar with Jermaine Ortiz, like watch this guy. It was like, it's not going to be the walk in the park you think it's going to be. And it really wasn't, you know what I'm saying? But like just from what I've seen from him, I know you heard me say before, I want to see more of him because I think he has some good skills. He has really good size. Yeah, it looks like he has decent power, nothing too scary, but decent enough because it comes behind that size. So I just appreciated Loma not like blaming it on Rust or anything like that. Just listen, it was a tough fight.
yeah,
No, it was a tough fight. So I respected that.
Yeah, I definitely heard him say that as well. In regards to Jermaine Ortiz, especially Jermaine, because I think Jermaine Ortiz had beaten Jamal Herring and then he fought Lomachenko. I could be wrong about that. So he kind of had that like traction going his way. And I do think that both can be true. I do think that maybe the large part was being his training partner for all those years, right? In terms of Rust, I guess is relative, right? Him not bringing it up or not saying doesn't necessarily mean that wasn't a factor, right? But it just may not have been much of the driving force as to why he performed the way he performed. You get what I mean? Because I find it hard to believe if Loma would have took that Jermaine Ortiz fight right after Nakatani, I don't think that the way he performed would have looked the way it would have looked. You get what I mean?
I feel that.
Then again, I mean, he knows himself, right? Who am I to say, that's what my opinion or how I viewed the fight is what it actually was, right? So we can only go based off of how he felt and what he's saying. So
there's also a stigma in boxing, if you're like, supposed to be like one of the guys or anything, and you just don't wipe the floor with someone, it's like a stigma on like the audience to almost say that you lost because you didn't perform the way you did, right? I'm not gonna go too deep into this fight, but like another fight that comes to mind is Spence Porter, which was a great fight. But I think, in my opinion, Errol Spence clearly won that fight. And then, but I know a lot of people who, not a lot of people, I know people who say Sean Porter, won, and even a judge had him winning. But I think it's, Errol's, I'm going to knock this guy out. Why wouldn't I just go knock Sean Porter out and take his belt real easy? You know what I'm saying? And I think the stigma, you say, all right, this guy's going to wipe the floor with him, and it gets in, and it's a closer fight than you think. And you know how we feel about them judges. They start saying, you know what? Let me go back and change this. You know what I'm saying? Nah, Errol should have been, and I think Vasily Lomachenko was a victim of that. The fight was kind of tight until maybe like the last 3 rounds, where I think Loma took him in the deep end and drowned him. But you know what I'm saying? Because Loma didn't do what Loma should have did. You know what I'm saying? Now he's lost a step, this, that, and the third. And like you said, maybe he has. We don't know. We'll see. But I just think, that's a stigma that boxing has to get rid of. Every time you're like a favorite or something, you don't do what we say you were supposed to do. Now you're trash. You know what I'm saying? I don't like that about boxing.
Honestly, that's a good point. And I don't want to kind of veer too far off, right? But I think people just view things or they view situations without context, right? Boxing is a very complicated sport. The best man that night will win the fight. And there's a lot of different factors, right? You got injuries, you got, weight, you got styles, you got coaching, you got so many different factors, right? That plays a role in determining who wins a fight. And you're absolutely right. I think people, especially the judges, they definitely develop this bias, these biases, whether it's recency bias or just comparing fighters at their peak. And they're like, okay, these are the expectations I have. So if you fall below that, then you're not as good as I thought you initially were.
Yeah.
And then I now have to deduct additional points, right? Which is not fair whatsoever. Going back to the Errol Spence fight, right? Like even Errol Spence just going into that fight, the context is him ballooning up to 190, losing weight, and then his game plan was to beat Sean Porter at his own game, as opposed to kind of going in how he normally does and sticks the fight through, has a game plan. Probably that's probably the only fight he may have not been listening to Derek James, right? But I think context absolutely matters in fights. And I think you have to go into these fights and really judge them objectively, right? Judge them as if this is the first time watching them fight. You know what I mean? And not kind of develop this biases. But it's pretty subjective for a lot of fans. And that's why you see a lot of robberies. So
let me ask you how you feel about this. So Lomachenko wins the fight. Devin Haney gets in the ring. Probably the first time they really came face to face. I don't know. I didn't see any other videos on it, but probably the first time they really came face to face. He said, "Oh, you look like a heavyweight." I took it as a joke. I didn't take it as, I'm planting this excuse from right now, just in case I lost the fight, to say that you're too big. I took it as a joke. Even the other day when they were like, he's a little taller than you. He said, no, he's taller than me. He's bigger than me. You know what I'm saying? But he's always like laughed at it. You know what I'm saying? It didn't necessarily seem like an excuse to me. What's your opinion on that?
My opinion is, I think that's just a reach. I'm not a linguistic expert, but if a Ukrainian comes into the ring and says, "Oh, it looked like heavyweights," I'm gonna assume that's a joke.
Yeah.
And he's laughing and just looking at body language, just looking at the statement being made. Like, I wouldn't take that as, and that's during that moment, right then. There's not like they're about to go and fight. You understand what I mean? Like, that makes zero sense. So I think it's just a reach to make that claim. Absolutely.
Yeah.